as I was approaching the weekend, I realized that there were two things that kind of converged in my mind this week and have shaped what I want to try to say this morning. And one of them, the first one, is that Monday, Marion and I drove to the mortuary and picked up Linda's ashes. And so we have those at our home right now. And it was just, I've done this. I did this for my mother. And now I've done it for Linda. And it's always kind of a surreal experience. And I don't know if you've ever had the connection with mortuary personnel, but they're always so quiet and solicitous and calming and just almost over polite. But I appreciated his efforts, just to make us feel comfortable in an uncomfortable, strange situation. But it was just strange. We haven't kind of put the final period on the end of it. In fact, the soak that we're talking about on July 18th will be a combination of a soak and a memorial for Linda. So we're working on that right now and putting that all together and trying to get her son down to join us. But yeah, it was just after all this time, after a year in hospice and all the years that we had together, it was just one of those marks in life, right? And then the second thing that kind of laid right on top of it is that in 2 days, we're going to be having our 18th anniversary here at the Effect. So we will be 18 years old on Tuesday. So May 20th, 2007 to May 20th, 2025, and we're at 18 now. And so even though anniversaries are really just kind of artificial lines, aren't they? I mean, they're just lines that we put down, and they're not arbitrary exactly. They have to do with our trips around the sun. But it's just a day, like any other day. And yet, in our minds, to be able to recall what the anniversary does is give us that look back time. It sparks all these memories. And that's also been firing in me all week long, thinking about the anniversary, thinking about these last 18 years, and thinking about everything that has taken place that many of us have been witness to. But it's interesting that this time, it wasn't so much that I was thinking back along the timeline and what actually happened, all the different events and moves and all the things that we did. This year was more about the people and kind of the parade of people that have come in and out of my life and our lives throughout all these 18 years. And maybe because of Linda, having just working with her in the mortuary, and maybe it's because I'm growing older, and maybe it's because I'm watching a heck of a lot more health issues among members and friends lately. I mean, we just heard from Nina, and she's fighting for her life, and we've got a couple of our virtual members in Phoenix. We've got Brady fighting through cancer, and Danielle up in Camarillo fighting through cancer. We got Scotty right here with his health problems, and so many more. I mean, it seems like it's almost an epidemic. And so I think the combination of all of these, I've really been thinking a lot about those who have meant so much to me personally and so much to our community over these last 18 years. And many of those have moved on, and many of those have passed on. And it is so, I don't know, it's a strange feeling to sit on this perch, to be as old as I am, with as many years as we piled on as a community, to have that kind of panorama, to have that kind of view of things. And I suppose because of, the illnesses and maybe my advancing age, it can't help but increase your mortality salience. Now, there's a big phrase, huh? Mortality salience. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's a psychological term for just the prominence, the profile that death has in your mind. How much is it? Are you aware of it? Are you aware of your own death? That's mortality salience. And it has a lot to do with what's called terror management theory. And this is kind of a weird phrase, terror management theory, But that has to do with the coping strategies, what we do to deal with the anxieties that are created by our knowledge of death, by our mortality salience. That just knowledge that we're going to die. How do you cope with that? How do you deal with that, right? And it's interesting because, our pets don't have this. Our dogs, our cats, our fish, our birds, they don't have mortality salience, not in the way that we do, not to have an abstract thought about their death. Small children don't have it. Is it kind of weird to think about? I don't know, maybe it's just me. But this little puppy right here doesn't have the awareness of death in the way that a human does. And it's the human condition, right? We're fragile creatures, vulnerable creatures, living under a death sentence. Wow. That's kind of a mind job if you think about it. And yet that's how every single one of the billions upon billions of humans that have graced the planet have needed to live. And that knowledge, that salience, right? It affects your interface with life. Everything that you use in you to connect with life. It colors everything. It colors your attitudes, it colors your experiences, and it colors your fears, obviously. So I suppose the question becomes, how are we going to have a healthy relationship with death? Because we're going to need one if we're going to live our lives and live them to the full. And as we watch people struggling and passing on, how do we continue on? And that's been something I've been thinking as you grow older. That's something I've been thinking about more and more. So how do you have a healthy relationship with death? And I think the first thing that has to happen is that you've got to consider it. You can't avoid it. You can't pretend that it doesn't exist. And yet that's exactly what our culture does. Our society pretends that death doesn't exist. First of all, we idolize the youth and the youth culture, right? Those of us who are aging are trying to look younger and doing everything that we can to stay young. We hide death from each other. The elderly, we kind of put them away. Those who are infirm, we put them away. We don't see them. They're not at the forefront of our thoughts. In our culture, the elderly aren't even revered. We don't go to them as sources of wisdom. You know, hey, boomer, you know, we're the ones that are not being considered. And we don't even consider the circle of life, really. We don't consider that in order for us to stay alive, something else has to die. That's just the way it is. Every time we eat something, something had to die. And so we take our food and we remove the killing process and take it far, far away, and then everything is neat under cellophane wrap in clear glass cases so that we don't really have to think about that circle of life. And so our culture is no help. Our society is no help in all of this. And yet, on the other hand, we can't focus so much on death that it takes away from our experience of life right here and right now. There's got to be some kind of balance. It's fascinating that in the scriptures, we see the Jews leaving Egypt, which was a death-obsessed culture. Ancient Egypt was death-obsessed. Everything was about the afterlife. All the pyramids and all the tombs and everything they did and all the rites. The Book of the Dead was their holiest book. And so what do the Hebrews do as soon as they leave? They become obsessed with life, right here and right now. They're aware of death, and they don't believe that death is the end of human existence. But everything for them is focused right here and right now. And so somewhere in between, to be focused here and now, but still aware of death, is the balance that we need to strike if we're going to have this healthy relationship. Now, as a human being, you can't help fearing the unknown. We're just going to do that, okay? So take that for granted. We're not going to be able to not fear uncertainty. But if we are able to think through the uncertainty, think through what we can't know, to start accepting what we can't know, to start accepting life on life's terms, which is finite. Our lives are finite. Then we're going to start to move into a certain kind of balance. But acceptance, non-avoidance, standing right up to what is the basic truths of our lives. And when it comes to life, you know, you've all heard of supply and demand, right? As one goes up, the other goes down. So if you have more demand, then you're going to have a lesser supply, you know. More supply, you're going to have less demand, so on and so forth. It's the same thing with life. If you think about it, life is more precious the shorter it is. Life is more precious the shorter it is. It's like a musical note that is defined before and after by silence. If it weren't for the silence, there would be no note. We need the negative as well as the positive. And life is defined by death. In a very real way, life is only heard between the silences before and after. And if we really want to live life to the full, we're going to have to accept that death is this integral part of life. And life can only be understood through death, and death can only be understood through life. I wanted to read this incredible poem. If you've ever read The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, his page on death, I just want to read it to you. Just sit back and take a listen and see about the themes that he's trying to get across here. Then El Mitra spoke, saying, "We would ask now of death." And the prophet said, "You would know the secret of death, but how shall you find it unless you seek it in the heart of life? The owl whose night-bound eyes are blind unto the day cannot unveil the mystery of light. If you would indeed behold the spirit of death, open your heart wide unto the body of life. For life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. In the depths of your hopes and desires lies your silent knowledge of the beyond. And like seeds dreaming beneath the snow, your heart dreams of spring. Trust the dreams, for in them is hidden the gate to eternity. Your fear of death is but the trembling of the shepherd when he stands before the king whose hand is to be laid upon him in honor. Is the shepherd not joyful beneath his trembling, that he shall wear the mark of the king? Yet is he not more mindful of his trembling? For what is it to die, but to stand naked in the wind and melt into the sun? And what is it to cease breathing, but to free the breath from its restless tides, that it may rise and expand and seek God unencumbered? Only when you drink from the river of silence shall you indeed sing. And when you have reached the mountaintop, then you shall begin to climb. And when the earth shall claim your limbs, then you shall truly dance. You see what he's saying? We become free of the fear of death the more we immerse in life. The more we learn what life really is, in experience, not in theory, not in our minds, but in experience, then we learn about death and the beyond. This one key line, in the depths of your hopes and desires, in the depths of your hopes and desires, lies your silent knowledge of the beyond. That's the contemplative way. In the depths of everything that we yearn for, that blessed unrest, that divine dissatisfaction, that drives us forward into these places where we're willing to step aside from everything that limits our vision so that we can finally see that in the depths of our hopes and desires lies our silent knowledge of the beyond. And so looking back 18 years now, I've been so struck again this week by all those who have come and gone out of my life, out of your lives, those who have passed on. And those who have passed on remind me of the brevity of life, of course. They remind me that we need to make this count. It's so short, and it seems to be going shorter and faster as we go, right? But it reminds me of the brevity of life, but not in a fearful way, but gratefully for what all of these people that have paraded through my life have showed me, have modeled for me, what they have gave me. I was thinking about this. You know, often it's harder to see such gifts coming from the living than the dead. Have you ever thought about that? And I think maybe it's because when we're dealing with our friends, our living friends, it's an ongoing relationship. And we can start to take that for granted as we go. And as we're dealing with our friends, it's mixed in with all of their faults and all the things that really annoy us about our friends. Jesus said that the prophet is not accepted in his own home. I think there's something to that. Just as we're banging around together, it's hard to see that kind of wisdom coming from someone that you also know the other things about as well. And yet they're there. They're there. Kind of Joni Mitchell-ish. You don't know what you got till it's gone. Yeah, it's kind of like that. And when someone is gone, then you can absolutely reflect on their life in its entirety. You can start to see the beginning from the end. And over time, you can exclude and you can minimize those faults. You can accommodate them into everything else that you've experienced. And this week I've been thinking about 4 men. 4 men who are connected to the effect and who left indelible impressions on me, and I'm sure on many of you as well if you've been here long enough. And the first one that you probably don't know is Jeff Larson. And Jeff Larson, it's interesting. I was thinking about him, and I can't remember the first time I met him. I don't know who introduced us. It's kind of like a dream. In a dream, you can't remember how you got there. You're just there in the dream. There's never any beginning to a dream. It's kind of like that with all 4 of these guys. I don't remember how we got started, but I remember the relationship. Somehow we got connected, and this was 4 years, maybe 3-4 years before we started the effect. And Jeff was an ex-Navy vet. He was a submariner. Now, how many submariners do you know? I mean, he actually worked in nuclear submarines. And when he got out of the Navy, he parlayed that into a great job where he was selling nuclear power all across the world. Spent a lot of time in China. So he was always on jets and moving here and back and forth. And we got connected somehow, and we started talking. And I was in the midst of writing the first edition of The Fifth Way. And so we started a thing where I would write a chapter and I would send it to him and he'd read it and he'd mark it up and he'd send it back to me. And we were just this kind of editorial connection that was going on. And it was so great because, he was on the other end of the line, so to speak. And when he was flying 12, 14 hours at a time, he would have the manuscript with him and he'd tell me all the conversations that he got into by someone asking, what are you reading? And then he'd explain it. And then they got into all the actual subject matter. And it was just great that way. And it was a wonderful relationship. And as we were getting close to starting the effect, he and his girlfriend, Lisa, they both came alongside us. They were already immersed and engaged in their own church, and so they didn't join the effect. But they were there in all the leadership meetings, and they were there helping us and doing everything right up to the launch date of the church. And they were there faithfully all the time. In fact, when you get your communion the next time, and John comes by with that oak little circle of wood with all the holes drilled in it, his girlfriend Lisa made that for us, made 2 of them for us. So this is a woman with a drill press. Now, that's pretty cool as well, right? She made that for us, and they're still in perfect service for us now, 18 years later. Also, Jeff was a runner. He ran marathons, and he was training for a marathon. And one morning, he got up like he always did and went for a run, and he didn't come back, and they found him on the street. He had just died of a massive heart attack while running. He's only 52 years old. I still remember the phone call coming from his girlfriend. She could barely speak to me to just notify me and tell me what had happened to Jeff. And the funeral was amazing. It was at a big church with a lot of people there. And of course, it was a full military funeral. If you've ever been to one of those, they're the most moving things in the world. The way the detail moves, the taps and the flag and the 21 gun salute and all of that. It was amazing. They didn't have the guns because it was inside. And they had a memorial table with all the things, all his favorite things. His running shoes were there. And I was really proud because a copy of The Fifth Way was there as well. Well, when I think back on Jeff, what I realized that he was teaching me about presence. It was all about presence. He was so present to me. He was present to Marian and us and everyone in the leadership group all the way through the launch of the church. And then 5 years later, he was gone. But presence. That was so important. And the next man is also Jeff Jones this time. And I know many of you know Jeff Jones. Again, I can't remember the first time that we met. I know that we were connected through his wife, Lisa, who was our lead singer for a long time. At the time, before the effects started, Lisa and another guitarist and I were playing at a church for a recovery session on Tuesday nights. And I'm sure that if she didn't introduce me, at least I saw him and got to know him. But the first that I actually remember about Jeff, the first memory that I have, is I was also in charge of a nonprofit that worked in Mexico called Children of the Americas. And we had a really big gala event, in a very fancy ballroom down at the harbor. And it was all kind of, everyone dressed up and all the lighting and everything. And I was emceeing the presentation part of the evening. And I don't know how it happens. I said something, and Jeff just called out from the room. And then I answered him, and within 2 or 3 lines, he had the entire room just in hysterical laughter. And that's just the way Jeff was. He was the most gregarious. He was the yang to my yin. I never really expected doing this without Jeff, because he's everything that I'm not as an introvert. He was just the gregarious one that would just go out. He was a salesman, so that he could sell snowballs to Eskimos, because he just had that kind of personality, just that winning personality, that ability to just say whatever needed to be said or didn't need to be said, but said it in a way that was just engaging. It was welcome in the room. He used to do the announcements that Marion is doing, and one Sunday he gets up there, you never knew what he was going to say. And he said, Dave's messages are kind of like creeper pot. They don't hit you right away. They hit you a little bit later on. Now, we had a lot more early recovery in our rooms back then, but even so, it was kind of a wild thing to say and turned a lot of heads around. But it was the funniest thing. And that was just Jeff. That was the way he was. And what I realized when I looked back on Jeff, what he taught me about was passion. He had such a passion for everything that he did. His problem was, though, that he couldn't control the passion. And as he started moving into this experiment that we call the effect, his passion started getting in the way, because it started affecting his finances, it started affecting his marriage, started to affect everything that he was doing. He was becoming more and more unstable because he had this vision that he wanted so badly and was trying to get, and he couldn't quite scratch the itch. And it led him all the way up to heroin relapse. And he survived that one, but it changed everything. He couldn't be in our leadership group for a period of time, and it was hard. It ended his marriage. All these things happened. And 3 years later, he relapsed again, and that time it killed him. And that, again, I remember Marion and I were together. It was July 4th, 2016. I remember the date. We were in Irvine Spectrum having dinner, getting ready to watch fireworks, and I get the call that nobody knew where Jeff was. And I remember calling around trying to find out where he was. And we didn't find out till later that he didn't make it back across the border. But passion. Yes, we needed to be regulated. Yes, we needed to be controlled with the other things for which we're responsible. But presence and passion, so important. And of course, the third is Lenny Rosenbaum. And again, I don't remember when I first met Lenny, but I remember him in our Wednesday book studies. And he showed up after probably the first 1 or 2 times with Sharon, who was his girlfriend at the time. And of course, Sharon was sitting there with arms folded and just, yeah, you show me. She was Missouri. You show me. The show me state, But Lenny he should have been, he missed his calling. He should have been a stand-up comic. He had a mind that worked so fast. Anything that was said, any situation, he could transform that. He had a way of seeing from a perspective that was just, 12 degrees off from everybody else. And he saw life from that perspective, and he would say something from that perspective that was just hilarious. And he always had the ability to just say the right thing at the right time that just lightened the load and just opened everyone up, broke the ice, transformed the temperature of the room. And not only him, but those 2 little dogs that were ubiquitous with him all over the place. But once again, I don't think he ever really recovered from losing his job. That was a thing that just seemed, his job that he had had for so many years, when he lost that job, it was like a piece of him was taken. And we immediately scooped him up and hired him into our treatment center. But it wasn't the same. He did okay for a while. But I still remember the time in a leadership meeting that he had this look on his face, and he just pulled me out of the room, and we stood in the hall. He said, I just can't do this anymore. I can't do this. I said, that's okay. That's okay. You know, if you want, obviously, if you need to make a transition, whatever, you can drive for a while if that's easier for you. But within a couple of months, he was dead. He took his own life. And yet, at the same time, when I think of Lenny, what I don't think about is the tragedy. What I think about is the humor, because that's what he was teaching me. How humor changes our experience of life, how humor unites us. And the tragedy, I guess, of Lenny is that he just ran out of runway. He was changing, he was getting forward, but it just wasn't quite fast enough. And he lost it, lost his way. But his humor is what stands out to me so much. Presence, passion, humor. And of course, out of that, met Kathy for the first time as the family was planning the memorial service. And it's been kind of a corporate love affair ever since. So the good that comes out of even the most difficult situations, right? And the fourth is Bubba, our Robert Beecham. And again, I don't remember the first time I met him, but he came in through Jeff. Jeff knew him. He was in AA at the time. Very wealthy man from a wealthy family. And he started supporting the effect in ways that he could. But there was just a presence to Bubba. There was a disarming way that he approached. You never would have known that he had a dime if you didn't know about him. He didn't ever flaunt that. He was there for everyone. He was the caring guide who would always be talking to whomever needed to be talking to. He started the Wednesday night AA meeting that is still going on to this day. But everyone just loved to be near him, be with him. I was privileged to have many long discussions with him as he was working through his theology and trying to figure things out. But even so, he was taking care of me and taking care of all of us at the same time. And even today, his family continues to take care of him, take care of all of us. And what I was learning from Bubba was devotion. The devotion that transforms relationships, changes everything. If you know that someone is devoted to you, that they care about you, that they hear you, they're willing to put something out for you. That's what I got from Bubba. And I remember the phone call that I got from his son, like 5:30, 6 o'clock one morning. And as soon as I saw his son's name on my phone, I knew, because he had been failing in health and he had congestive heart failure. And his son was calling to tell me that he had died. And that was only 2018. Bubba was 78. All three of the other men that I'm talking about were only in their 50s when they died. Young still, by our standards, right? They didn't have long lives, but they had consequential lives, at least for those who knew them. Consequential. Each had their faults, of course. And if I want to quote Joni Mitchell again, it's cloud illusions, I recall. It's not that these were illusions. They were the essence of these men. They were the gifts that they were giving, right? The presence, the passion, the humor, the devotion. And the gifts were packaged with their faults. But now those faults are softened with time. I don't really recall them anymore. They're forgiven from the standpoint that I am free from whatever they cost me at the time. And now it's just the gifts that remain. Just those beautiful parts of who they were. And each in their own way, whether they were intentional of it, whether they were aware of it or not, they helped me along Jesus' way. They helped me and so many of us to move along Jesus' way. And Jesus had a short life too. Obviously, it was a consequential life. But these men and Jesus are not my only teachers. All of you, as you reflect Jesus' way, are teaching me and teaching everyone else that you meet. And what we're all teaching each other, if we are reflecting Jesus, is this ruthless, unapologetic, upside downing of our view of the world, of the way that we look at life. Because that's what Jesus was about. He was trying to radically change the way that we looked at everything so that we could see the truth. We could see what we needed to see. But because we fear death, our terror management coping strategies, right, are dysfunctional and they're limiting because they come out of our fear. They are avoidant of death, which means they are avoidant of life. You can't avoid death without avoiding life as well. But those who have gone before, and I suppose all of our advancing age, making death, making our mortality more salient, but at the same time, all of these gifts that we're getting are also making death less fearful if we're paying attention. If over time we can start to become convinced of the presence of uncertainty. That's it. Can we have conviction in the presence of uncertainty? Is that possible? Can we be convinced and uncertain at the same time? Think about that. Can we be convinced? Can we have conviction and yet still be uncertain at the same time? Well, it's not going to be about debating. It's not going to be about debating theology or philosophy. It's not going to be about believing that we can accomplish certainty if only we try hard enough. If only we interpret just right, then we can get to certainty. Certainty is a unicorn, all right? It's a striving after the wind, as Ecclesiastes says. It doesn't exist in this life. Certainty doesn't exist, but conviction is essential. But the thing about conviction is you can only prove it to yourself. Never be able to prove it to anybody else. Certainty is like judgment. It's a mental construct. You can do it across the room. You can do it across the parking lot. You can do it across the galaxy because it is just a mental construct that you set up in your mind against some standard that you carry around. It really has nothing to do with whatever you're judging. It's all right here. That's why Jesus tells us don't judge. Stop this mental calculation, this constant categorizing that we do, pitting one thing against another. Conviction is like discernment. And discernment only comes, you can only discern something that you haven't experienced, and experienced intimately enough to actually know what it is that you see. We have to do discernment because discernment and the experience that comes through is where we become convinced. How do we become convinced of anything? We must act. We got to do something. We got to live it out. Not in the sense of striving to accomplish something, but to simply live out our presence, live out this intimacy, be willing to be vulnerable enough to really be seen and to be in relationship, to connect. These experiences must be firsthand. The spirit of life has to be experienced firsthand. In order for us to become convinced that that spirit of life also resides in death, that it is a continuum, that it continues on. I wanted to read just a little bit from probably a source that you wouldn't expect on a Sunday morning. How about Zorba the Greek? Huh? But this is from the novel by Nikos Kazantzakis. A little bit of a Greek name there. The aim of man and matter is to create joy. The aim of man and matter is to create joy. Others would say to create spirit, but that comes to the same thing on another plane. Do you see how he's making those two connections? Here in life, we experience the joy. In another plane, we can call it spirit. But they're indistinguishable from one another. To experience God's Spirit here in this life is to experience joy. If we can create the joy, we're connecting with the Spirit. The highest point a man can attain is not knowledge or virtue or goodness or victory, but something greater, more heroic and more despairing. He calls it sacred awe. Sacred awe. This is what fear of the Lord is all about. It's sacred awe. It's not being afraid of anything. And awe is exactly this contemplative space that we were talking about, where minds stop calculating. They stop judging. They go on hold. They go off to the side. Because in the space that we're in this awe, there is nothing to calculate. All the dials are pegged to infinity. There's nothing that you can measure. Absolutely nothing. Because we've stepped outside of physics. We've stepped outside of everything that we can measure with our instruments, that we can think with our minds. That is the space in which we can actually learn and experience the truth of life that extends beyond death. And once experienced, what's left to do? Well, we create joy. And he says, I felt once more how simple a thing is happiness. A glass of wine, a roasted chestnut, a wretched little brazier, the sound of the sea. Nothing else. And all that is required to feel that here and now is happiness in a simple, frugal heart. That's it. Where have we heard that before? How about Ecclesiastes 2, verse 24? There is nothing better for a man than to eat and drink and tell himself that his labor is good. This also I have seen, that it is from the hand of God. For who can eat and who can have enjoyment without God? All of life, everything that it means to be alive, is right here and right now. And all of death, too, is right here and right now. We have to see the connection. We will never be able to understand death or be certain of what it is, but we can experience life. And the more that we can immerse completely in life, in this moment, the more we can create joy and feel the happiness in the moment, the more that we know that our fear is only in our minds, not in life and not in death. It's just here. And when we step out of our minds into the stream of life, the more convinced we become. The more convinced that the joy of life is the Spirit of God. That is all time and all dimension at once. Right here, right now. It's all here. There's no other there out there. What does Thomas Merton have to say? He says, there is greater comfort in the substance of silence than in the answer to a question. It's not about knowledge, right? Eternity is in the present. Eternity is in the palm of the hand. Eternity is a seed of fire whose sudden roots break barriers that keep my heart from being an abyss. The things of time are in connivance with eternity. Read that over a few times, because there's so much there in so little space. But even smaller space from William Blake. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower. To hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. All of eternity, all of life, love, death is simultaneous. It's right now. It's here. And of course, this defies our sense of self, time, physics, all of that. But our teachers, all those who reflect Jesus in our life, whether they know it or not, whether they're even trying or not, are teaching us to live with presence, passion, humor, and devotion. Because to live like this with those four attributes is to voluntarily step outside the container that we will leave at death. How do you have a healthy relationship with death? Start practicing it now. Soften the bindings that hold you inside yourself, inside your mind, so you can more easily slip in and out of that identity with your mind and all the thinking and all the calculations and all the judgments and everything that keep us fearful and separated, worrying about the moment of our death. In prayer, this can be done. In meditation, this can be done. But also simply in a mindful, present life, living through the moments of our day with presence, with purpose, with intention, with awareness, and always to identify more with the eternity in the palm of our hand rather than the thoughts in our head. One last thought is a teaching that I love to read at the end of memorial services because it's a reminder to the living, even as we're grieving the dead, what our lives are really all about. And Tecumseh was the great 17th century Shawnee chief who was a fierce warrior. He was probably the one who would be the passion one, right? But listen to what he says. So live your life that the fear of death can never enter your heart. Love your life. Perfect your life. Beautify all things in your life. Seek to make your life long and of service to your people. Show respect to all people, but grovel to none. When you arise in the morning, give thanks for the light, for your life, for your strength. Give thanks for your food and for the joy of living. If you see no reason for giving thanks, the fault lies only in yourself. And when it comes your time to die, be not like those whose hearts are filled with the fear of death, so that when their time comes, they weep and pray for a little more time to live their lives over again in a different way. Sing your death song and die like a hero going home. Let's pray. Father, there is so much here. From time immemorial, from the very beginnings of our race as humankind, this has been the issue around which all other issues revolve. Help us with this, Father. Help us to see our teachers while they're still with us. Help us to see past the faults. Help us to see past our own biases. Help us to see what is being offered every single moment. And when people have passed on, help us to reflect on their lives, to distill out what they gave us. They all gave us something. And the more that we immerse in that, in the awareness of our friends and the people that we meet and how they live and how they die, slowly through the mist will come our own knowledge, way of knowing, our conviction that here in life is the key to everything. And your love and your spirit. That's what we're looking for, Father. We thank you for these 18 years. We thank you for everyone who made them possible. We thank you for the sanctity of this space and the time that we have together. May it continue to teach all of us everything that we need to know for as long as we're here, so that we can also die like a hero going home. Thank you, Father. Never let us forget we can only love because you loved us first. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's all stand.